Hello there, welcome. If the algorithm did its job, I have found one of three people, maybe. And if you're anyone else, also welcome. But if you're a new RBT, new Registered Behavior Technician, or you're just about to be a Registered Behavior Technician, and heck, if you're one of those RBTs that's been doing this for a while and you want to learn a little more, that's awesome too. Because my whole point of this video is this. The 40 hours is not enough. The 40 hours was never enough. The 40 hours is completely insufficient and kind of immoral. So, here's where I am, and here's the point I'm going to make. I'm going to use a simile, a comparison point to make between your role as a registered behavior technician with an applicable field of practice that treats human beings to another field of practice that treats human beings. The other one is medicine. So, your role, you are an RBT, a registered behavior technician. I'm going to compare you to nursing, okay? So, there's a few big differences in those roles, just in the forefront. One of those is educational. So to be a nurse, even just at an LPN, which is, from my understanding, a vocational nurse, is one of probably the quickest to get. It's going to take a year of classes to do that, okay? As an RBT, it took me about 2 weeks to do the 40 hours and to do the other material, okay? So, what's my point with this? Well, your role as an RBT is very similar to a nurse. Very similar, and I want you to think about it this way. Why? You both practice a science, an applicable science, on human beings, okay? Both of you do so under the direct orders of a provider, and your practice, both of you, the nurse and an RBT, both of your practices can be harmful, or you can do great good. So, my point there is this. The RBT serves in a role that can harm people, and we do not give enough credence to that. So here's why. What do you know about the history of behavior analysis, I ask you? What do you know? Where did this field start? Well, many of you, specifically if you've not been trained in the field, will automatically retort to, oh, it started with Lavasse, who did the trials. He had a control group of students with autism spectrum disorder, and he had another group. They had 40 hours of discrete trial training, and in the other group we saw these immense improvements. That study has its own issues, but no, that's not where it started. It did not start there. It started a bit back. Of course, you could actually argue that the first case of applied behavior analysis was really not a therapeutic approach at all. It was an organizational behavioral approach. We look back to the 7 Dimensions of ABA, published at the University of Kansas, I believe in the 1960s, I believe. I might be wrong on the date there. I want to think the late 1960s, but again, I'm going to get more specific and more wrong. But at least by that point, the University of Kansas, the 7 Dimensions of ABA, the 7 dimensions. That was the philosophical foundation to what applied behavior analysis was. But it really started with B.F. Skinner and the experimental analysis of behavior, who founded the 3-term contingency, the antecedent, the behavior, the consequence, and the relationship between those 3 things and how you can manipulate the independent variables and change the dependent variables, right? So, a lot of history that is before Lavasse. Okay, and you might also know that before B.F. Skinner and the experimental analysis of behavior, that was methodological behaviorism before he found radical behaviorism. Radical behaviorism being and I'm not getting into specifics, I'm just telling you how much there is. Radical behaviorism being this whole will try to look at the inner workings, the private events and the private things that also influence behavior, because those are behaviors themselves. While methodological behaviorism, if we're looking at Watson, said, oh, we only look at the observable. And you had little Albert, baby Albert. You might have learned that if you ever take a psychology class. Little Albert was exposed to a fuzzy animal at the same time a clashing pot was sounded behind him, and he developed a conditioned fear response to the fuzzy animal, even at the removal of the stimulus of the clashing pot. And guess what? We saw this classical conditioning approach in which one thing was associated with another, and we learned that we could learn behaviors this way. And we also, from that, there was other things that kind of fall under the applied behavior analysis umbrella. From that is deconditioning, doing the exposures at the removal of that stimulus to reduce, to put them through basically an extinction of that fear process, right? So lots and lots of history, lots of stuff that was going on before B.F. Skinner. And then there was B.F. Skinner, and B.F. Skinner did all these cool things and radical behaviorism, and we're going to look at the internal workings of the mind. He also thought we could apply this to government and other socially significant behavior. Look at Beyond Freedom and Dignity. There's so much cool stuff, and he did this. He had believed in this idea of a utopia, and there's so much there. There's so much there, but you really have. You're playing with a fire. I know I just went over this whole history thing, but there's so much. There's so much you could know. But what I really want you to get at is, you, just like medicine, you're playing with a fire. Fire can do many good things. I could cook food with it. I could heat this house. So, I have a heater right here. It burns natural gas. It produces a flame and it heats. Fire does good things. But if I'm not careful with it, or I use this improperly, the fire is going to burn down this whole house around me. Okay, the same thing with medicine. If a doctor prescribes, this is the important part, where your role is very similar to a nurse. If a doctor prescribes an inappropriate dose of a medication to treat a patient, I hope there's a cat he's locked in a bathroom. He's really trying to get out. If a doctor prescribes an inappropriate dose of medication, for example, they prescribe a certain benzodiazepine for a patient who's having seizures, okay? And a nurse needs to know what is the appropriate dose, because what if the doctor inadvertently gives them a dose that could kill the patient? They should know a little bit about the medication so that they don't inadvertently kill them. It's not the nurse's job to overrule the doctor, but it might be important for the nurse to go, hey, doc, are you sure? Let me repeat that to you again. And the doc goes, no, sorry. So as an RBT, you have the same role, because you're playing with a fire. What they don't tell you is that, specifically, let's look at Lavos and the methodologies associated there. There are a lot of people who believe that discrete trial training and those specific methodologies caused post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders to express themselves. This field had to learn that we can't target stimming because we have an issue with private events. Stimming and all those things might have this private, event going on. And we don't look at the brain. We don't look at behavior analysis doesn't look at the brain. Behavior analysis doesn't really consider the brain and the inner workings, the neurons and all that, and the internal experiences and emotional feelings and blah, 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 right? There's a lot of research there. There's good research. But it's not coming from behavior analysis. And that this field had to learn, maybe we shouldn't target those behaviors because it might have inadverse consequences. And we had to question what is socially significant and what is not socially significant. And we had to learn the appropriate dosages of things. And we also now learning that while you may be teaching a certain skill, a vocal skill or something through discrete trial training, you also might be inadvertently teaching compliance. Right? Because skills generalize. You're teaching behavior that is generalizing. Does it generalize to a stranger who says to do this? If you're saying do this and da-da-da-da, and then the stranger is asking you to do things, and you're doing those things because what comes after the behavior, the consequence that is reinforcing a reward, might put kids in dangerous situations, or it might make kids the specific issues with sexual abuse and all those things, right? So question what you're doing. This is not to say you have 40 hours. This is not, I'm going to go learn things and I'm going to be better than my BCBA. The BCBA has a lot more hours than you. And hopefully they've looked into these practices. But if you know something's got research behind it and is maybe counterintuitive, learn something so you can present that, so you can protect your clients. But do not put yourself in a position where you're better than your provider or anything like that, because you've got a lot to learn. Okay, it's true, you've got a lot to learn, and they may be able to explain certain things, but I want a field in which anyone who practices it has enough information to prevent harm. Right? Nurses can prevent harm all the time in hospitals, inadvertent medical malpractice. RBTs can too, because we're learning every day that just like medicine, our field can be inadvertently applied and cause bad things. So, that's really my point. So if you're a new RBT, study. Go learn things. Go look at B.F. Skinner. Go look at some of his work about behaviorism. Good place to start. Read some of his articles, his opinions. Read some of the new studies on PTSD, autism, and ABA. The effectiveness, what different methodologies and practices are more effective. Look at the issues and the adverse consequences of DTT. Go look and read and understand, because what you're practicing is a very cool field. And you'll learn that there's a lot more stuff outside of autism spectrum disorder, right? These applications are to human behavior. They're applied in organizational behavior management. A lot of the newer researches like relational frame theory and acceptance commitment training are targeting private events and mental health disorders and smoking cessation and addiction. There's a whole thing in Johns Hopkins that these people work with individuals who have an addiction disorder, and they're using behavior analysis to find treatments and manipulate contingencies and all that. Cool stuff going on all around. Don't limit yourself. Figure out if this is... Just learn more about what you're doing. I know it's an easy way to get into a field and help people, but we want to make sure that you're helping people. 40 hours isn't always so cut and dry. So, and that being said, thank you for tuning in, and I hope this is just a little forefront into a little series where we can talk about some of those issues and talk about a lot of things in ABA to make sure that ABA is decent. Because there's a lot there. There's a lot. For a little homework assignment, look into the history of conversion therapy. I'm sure many of you know that conversion therapy doesn't work. It's immoral. It's unethical. We'll look at Lovas and conversion therapy. And might see some interesting links between Lovas and that. So, good luck. Peace out. Till next time.